What if God is already preparing the change you have waited so long for? Maybe you ended up here after reading a sentence that sparked something deep inside you. Everything is going to change. I want you to hear those words again, not as an empty promise or a way to ignore what you are going through, but as a reminder that your current situation has no authority to stay this way forever. When you look at your life, you might see things that are stuck in the exact same place. An answer that hasn't come, a door that remains shut, a family worry that has been weighing on you for months, or an uncertainty that hits you every morning before you can even gather your thoughts. But before that heavy exhaustion tells you again that nothing will ever change, you need to remember something. God is with you right now, and as long as His presence is by your side, there's still hope. You don't have to pretend everything is fine just to come to Him. You can bring your questions, your worn-out faith, your confused heart, and those feelings you can't even put into words. His presence doesn't depend on you having a perfect attitude. God knows how much you have endured. He knows the conversations you keep replaying in your mind, and He has seen all the times you tried to keep moving forward, while deep down, you wondered if you would ever be able to live a different kind of life. This message isn't here to promise you a life without struggles, or to tell you that everything will be resolved overnight. It comes to remind you that your current reality is not a final sentence. Circumstances can change. People can make new choices. Doors can open, and even if your outer world takes time, God can begin a deep transformation inside of you. Often, the very first change doesn't happen around us, but in the way we begin to look at what we are facing. Psalm 30 verse 5 says that weeping may last through the night, but joy comes in the morning. These words don't deny the night, they don't minimize your tears, and they don't pretend that your pain was easy. They acknowledge that dark seasons are real, but they also declare that no night has the authority to stop the arrival of a brand new dawn forever. Maybe you've been staring at the same problem for so long that you can't even imagine any other way out. Your mind has learned to brace itself for disappointment. Before you even get an answer, you expect the worst. Before trying again, you remember everything that failed. But that reaction doesn't mean you've stopped loving God, or that you've lost all your faith. Most of the time, it just shows that you've been trying to protect yourself from getting hurt again. God doesn't condemn you for feeling this way. He draws close with patience and starts reminding you that you aren't forced to live trapped in the most painful outcome. What happened in your past can teach you, but it doesn't have to control every decision you make from now on. The past explains some of your gods, but it has no right to write your entire future. It's not about denying reality. It's about no longer treating the fear as if it were the only voice capable of interpreting it. Throughout this message, we will understand why certain situations seem to rob us of our hope, how the heart builds up defenses after so many disappointments, and how the presence of God can help us regain clarity without forcing us to ignore what we feel. We will also see that waiting does not mean standing still, and that there are small decisions capable of preparing our hearts to recognize change when it begins to arrive. Before we go any further, take a moment to think about the situation that has been weighing on your mind the most lately. You do not need to share all the details, just acknowledge what you feel when you think about it. Is it weariness, fear, confusion, sadness, or the feeling that you have already waited far too long? You can write a word in the comments that describes your current state, or complete this phrase: "Today I decide to believe again that." Do this as a way to honestly express the place from which you are listening to this message. And if these words are renewing your hope, please click the like button so this reflection can also reach other people who need to breathe and believe again. I also want to ask you to confirm that you are watching and listening to this content directly on Messages of God Official. Some of our audio has been used and republished by other channels without authorization. Staying here, sharing this video from its original source, and supporting the official channel helps us protect this work and continue creating messages that accompany those who are going through difficult times. Now look again at that situation that seemed to be at a standstill, not to deny what is happening, but to ask a different question. Instead of only asking yourself how much longer you will have to endure it, ask yourself what could begin to change inside you while you go through this process. Because perhaps the transformation you are waiting for didn't begin with a door opening, a phone call, or visible news. Maybe it started the day that something inside of you decided that fear would no longer have the last word. And if that change is already happening silently, What part of your life has begun to awaken without you even realizing it? Yet recognizing that something inside of you is. Awakening does not mean your weariness has disappeared. Often hope begins to return while there are still questions while reality seems unchanged. And part of your heart keeps protecting itself from a new disappointment. On the outside, maybe no one notices that struggle. You keep taking care of your responsibilities, answering messages, preparing what is needed for the day, and doing what is expected of you. But in the quiet moments, when the house grows quiet, or when you make your usual journey back home, a certain restlessness appears, one that is hard to explain. It is not always a clear thought. Sometimes it is just a heavy feeling, as if your mind could never fully rest. You have tried to find answers, replaying every detail. You return to a conversation, remembering a decision, imagining what might happen, and trying to anticipate all possible outcomes. You think that if you can just understand it all, maybe you can prevent another painful surprise. Without realizing it, your mind remains on guard, even when your body needs to rest. Living in constant expectation that something will go wrong slowly changes the way you look at life. A delay begins to feel like rejection. Silence seems to confirm your fears. A closed door becomes proof that no other will ever open. Not because that interpretation is necessarily true, but because a weary heart often looks at the present through the wounds it still remembers. Faith and fear can exist at the same time. You can trust in God and still feel uncertain. A difficult emotion doesn't break your relationship with Him, nor does it mean you've lost all the progress you made. You are simply a person trying to hold on to hope after living through moments that taught you to distrust the unexpected. God knows this inner conflict. He knows that a part of you wants to move forward, while another fears believing again. He sees the moment you pick up your phone, hoping for news, and also the moment you set it aside to protect yourself from another disappointment. He understands why certain words no longer comfort you like they used to, and why certain promises spark hope, but also a quiet resistance. The heart can build up walls that at first seem helpful. You stop expecting too much just so you won't get hurt. You avoid talking about what you need because you don't want to feel vulnerable. You get used to saying you're fine even when inside you don't know how to untangle your feelings. Little by little, this protection turns into distance, and that distance starts to feel like a normal way of living. You don't need to feel ashamed for ending up here. Those walls didn't go up because you were weak, but because you were trying to keep going with the strength you had left. Yet, what once helped you survive might now be keeping you from seeing a new possibility. Things on the outside may not show clear signs yet. The call hasn't come. The conversation is still pending. The path remains uncertain. But there is a question that deserves to be heard with an honest heart. How much of what you fear today truly belongs to this moment? And how much of it comes from past experiences that are still speaking inside you? Because it isn't always just the present situation that drains your soul. It's also the heavy weight of everything your heart fears reliving. To understand why hope feels so hard to hold on to, we need to look more closely at those inner voices that have been interpreting your story without you even noticing. Those voices don't always shout. Often they show up as seemingly reasonable thoughts. Don't get your hopes up. Remember what happened last time? Better expect the worst so you don't hurts. At first they look like caution, but over time they can turn into a way of looking at your entire life through a lens of distrust. When a situation remains unresolved, your mind desperately tries to regain that sense of control. It overanalyzes words, imagines worst-case scenarios, reads into silences, and searches for signs in every single detail. If someone takes too long to reply, you start to suspect that something is wrong. If a plan is delayed, you immediately conclude that it will never work out. And if someone else gets what you have been waiting for so long, comparing yourself to them stirs up an uncomfortable question. Why them and not me? But comparing yourself doesn't always mean you are a bitter or envious person. Sometimes it just shows how deeply you long to see some sign of progress in your own life story. You see families who seem to have put their struggles behind them, people who are sharing new opportunities and stories of unexpected blessings. Even though you're happy for them, you still feel a quiet, painful sting. You don't want to take anything away from them. You just wonder, when will it be your turn to breathe a little easier, with a bit more peace of mind? Comparison becomes toxic when you take just a tiny fraction of someone else's life and use it to judge the whole of yours. You see their success, but you don't know their entire journey. You look at the open door, but you didn't see all those days they had to wait too. Now, you see the happy photo, but you have no idea about the painful conversations that were left out of the frame. When you compare your inner struggles with someone else's polished outer appearance, you almost always end up being incredibly unfair to yourself. And inside that waiting there can also be a hidden sense of guilt. If you replay past decisions in your head thinking that if you had only done things differently, you wouldn't be facing this struggle today. Now it's healthy to acknowledge your mistakes and take responsibility where it's due. But what doesn't help is turning every single mistake into a life sentence. Healthy responsibility means looking at the past, honestly learning from it, and healing whatever you can. Destructive guilt, on the other hand, uses your past to convince you that you don't deserve a second chance. One helps you grow, while the other keeps you completely paralyzed. Remember, not everything you're going through is because of a choice you made. Some wounds were caused by the choices of others. Others came from deep loss, injustice, or circumstances that were completely out of your control. Yes, there are our own mistakes we have to own up to. But even in those moments, God isn't asking you to stay trapped forever in your darkest hour. His grace doesn't erase responsibility, but it does open a path so that that responsibility never becomes your prison. The desperate need for control takes over when you're trying to feel safe, by trying to micromanage every outcome before it even happens. You want to know, what will they say? How long is this going to take? Where will the resources come from? And what is the next step? Planning can be wise. Wise. The trouble starts when your peace depends on everything happening exactly as you imagined it. Then, any change feels like a threat. A change of plans feels like a sign of disaster. An unexpected response leaves you feeling lost, not because there isn't actually a path, but because you only allow one to exist. God can also guide you down paths you hadn't considered. That doesn't mean accepting every situation without discernment, nor calling everything that hurts a blessing. It means recognizing that your understanding is limited, and that life can still surprise you in ways that aren't necessarily negative. Old fears and real danger aren't the same either. Real danger requires attention, caution, and concrete decisions. Old fears react to the present as if all the pain of the past were happening all over again. Because of that, a difficult conversation can feel like abandonment. Criticism feels like total rejection. A delay starts to be interpreted as a complete failure. Before reacting, you can ask yourself, what is happening right now? And what part of my reaction belongs to something I experienced before? That question doesn't take away the emotion, but it creates space to see it with greater clarity. There's also a difference between reflecting and getting trapped in thoughts that spin in circles. Reflecting allows you to understand something and make a decision. Dwell continuously on the same fear brings exhaustion but offers no direction. When you notice that your mind keeps replaying a scene without finding anything new, maybe it's time to stop and say, I've thought enough for now. I don't need to figure out my whole life. Tonight, isolation can feel like protection. You stay silent because you fear not being understood. You stop asking for help because you don't want to feel like you're imposing. You get used to carrying everything alone and end up confusing strength with the absence of support. But being strong doesn't mean not needing anyone. Strength is also expressed by admitting when something is beyond you. Talking with a safe person, asking for advice, or admitting you need time to sort out your heart. None of this shows that your faith has disappeared. It reveals that you are human and that you've been trying to find safety in the midst of an uncertain time. Faith doesn't demand that you ignore your reactions. It invites you to observe them without letting them rule over all your decisions. God can still change your situation, but He also wants to help you recognize what inside you needs to be released so you can go through that change with fresh eyes. Because an open door can't always be enjoyed. When your heart keeps waiting for it to close again, maybe the question is no longer just when things on the outside will change. Maybe you also need to discover what God is doing with your way of looking, interpreting, and responding. There is a story in the Bible that shows what happens when a person spends so many years waiting. That pain almost becomes their identity until an encounter interrupts what seemed impossible to change. In the Gospel of Mark, we find a woman whose name wasn't recorded. Her story appears in Mark chapter 5. We know she had spent 12 years dealing with an illness that caused constant bleeding. The story doesn't give all the details of her life, but it lets us understand the depth of her suffering. 12 years isn't just a difficult moment. It's a whole stage of life. In 12 years, the seasons change so many times. People make plans, celebrate, birthdays start. Families begin new jobs and finish projects. While life kept moving forward around her, this woman kept on living with the very same struggle. The text says she had suffered deeply under the care of many doctors and had spent everything she had without getting any better. Instead, her condition only grew worse. It's not hard to imagine what that reality must have done to her spirit. Every new hope probably started with anticipation, a different recommendation, another attempt a conversation that seemed to offer a way out. Maybe she scraped together her last resources, made her way to a new place, and listened closely, hoping so desperately that this time would be different. But then, the disappointment would return. Every single attempt ended up reminding her that the illness was still there. There was also a social side to it. According to the religious rules of that time, her condition could cut her off from community life and keep her from touching other people. The problem didn't just affect her body. It must have shaped how she approached others, her sense of dignity, and whether she felt like she even belonged in a community. Her exhaustion wasn't just physical. She had lost her money, her time opportunities, and maybe even her belief that anything could ever change. After 12 years, hope couldn't have been easy to hold on to. She had probably learned to guard herself against expectation, and then she heard about Jesus. We don't know who told her. It might have been a conversation she overheard from a distance. Maybe someone mentioned how he healed people, restored lives, and treated those rejected by others with dignity. Something began to stir inside her. That news didn't erase 12 years of disappointment. She still carried the heavy memories of failed attempts and had every reason to fear being let down once again. Besides, trying to get close to Jesus in the middle of a crowd meant exposing herself. The journey was likely not easy. There were crowds of people surrounding him. Mark describes a crowd pressing in on him as he walked, with everyone trying to get close to listen or to ask for something. In the middle of all of that chaos, there she was. She didn't push her way to the center. She didn't shout her story in front of everyone, nor did she demand attention. The story shows a quiet, almost hidden act. She thought that if she could just touch Jesus' cloak, she would be healed. This conviction shouldn't be seen as a magic formula. The power wasn't in the fabric itself. Her gesture expressed the deep faith of a person who, after years of feeling trapped with no way out, dared to draw near once again. She pushed through the crowd. We can imagine her hesitant steps, the loud voices, the bodies pressing in her fear of being discovered and the dread of not making it to him. Maybe she thought about turning back. Yet she kept going. That step alone was profound, because before experiencing any visible change, she had made a choice deep down inside not to let past disappointments stop her from taking another step. Finally, she touched the edge of Jesus' cloak. The gospel tells us that instantly she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. After 12 years, what had seemed permanent had suddenly changed. But Jesus didn't just keep walking as if nothing had happened. He stopped and asked who touched his clothes. The disciples were surprised because the whole crowd was pressing in on him. So many people were close, bumping into him as they moved. But Jesus knew that this touch was different. The woman could have slipped away in silence. She could have taken her healing without ever sharing her story. But Jesus looked around, searching for the one who had touched him. Trembling with fear, she came forward, fell at his feet, and told him the whole truth. That moment reveals something deeply human. She had already felt the change in her body, yet she was still trembling. The miracle didn't instantly wipe away all of her fears. She had spent far too long feeling vulnerable and exposed. Her body was healed, but her heart was still processing what had just happened. Jesus didn't call her out to embarrass her. He stopped to truly see her. He didn't want her to leave thinking she had stolen something in the crowd. He wanted to turn an anonymous moment into a personal relationship, and so he called her daughter. After years of a condition that made her feel cast aside, Jesus chose a word that welcomed her back. Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be free from your suffering. He didn't just speak to her body, he spoke peace to her soul. She didn't just need her illness to end. She needed to walk again without carrying the identity of a broken, wounded person. She needed to realize she no longer had to hide that her story could be told without shame, and that there was a life waiting for her after that long, painful wait. Her life changed in a single moment, but the path that led her to Jesus was made up of many quiet steps. In her heart, listening, considering a new possibility, overcoming fear, drawing near, pushing through the crowd, reach out and finally tell the truth. Your story might not change in the exact same way or at the same time. The Bible doesn't give us the right to promise that every situation will have an immediate solution. But this story does show us the heart of Jesus when he's faced with someone who was tired of waiting. He didn't treat her like an annoyance, and he didn't tell her she was too late. He didn't reduce her to her problem or ignore the years she had suffered. He saw her in the middle of a crowd. And this speaks to your life too. Maybe today you feel lost in the crowd listening to a message, while carrying a burden that no one else fully understands. Maybe your struggle isn't visible from the outside. Even so, God doesn't mistake your voice for the noise of everyone else. He knows every single detail of your story. How long have you been waiting? How many times did you try? Think of the resources you spent, the hopes that faded away, and the fear that creeps in when someone asks you to believe again. That woman didn't get a full explanation about the past 12 years. Jesus didn't reveal to her why it had taken so long, nor did he turn her suffering into some cold academic lesson. He came to her in the present, right where she was, and opened up a whole new possibility. God can meet you in the exact same way, right where you are. Maybe the first step isn't feeling some extraordinary faith. Maybe it's just admitting, I'm terrified of getting my hopes up, but I still want to draw closer. That kind of honesty can be the beginning. The woman had learned to build her life around her problem. She organized her existence around what she couldn't do, the places she couldn't go, and the people she had to keep her distance from. When things changed, she had to learn a whole new way of seeing herself. That process can be a lot harder than it seems, because after living for so long with a hardship, even an open door can feel terrifying. What happens when a new opportunity finally opens up, but your heart still reacts as if you're trapped in the past? We can explore this question through the story of Mariana, a 43-year-old woman who for a long time felt like her life was completely on hold. From the outside, her days seemed perfectly normal. She would wake up early, make coffee, get things ready for her family, and head out to work. She always met her responsibilities. She would answer whenever someone asked how she was doing and smile during conversations. Yet every single morning she woke up with the exact same worry. Her family's financial situation had become highly unstable, and a series of family decisions had left deep wounds that nobody knew how to talk about. Mariana felt like everything depended on her. She would go over the bills while having breakfast, worry about the payments on her commute to work, and come back at home imagining new ways to handle what seemed to have no way out. Some nights she would sit in the kitchen after everyone else had gone to sleep. The yellow lights stayed on over the table. In front of her were bills, a notebook filled with numbers, and a phone she kept checking, hoping for some answer. She didn't always cry. Sometimes she would just sit there staring without really seeing. She had prayed so many times. At first, she did so with words full of expectation. Then, she started repeating quick prayers while doing other tasks, not because she had stopped believing, but because she felt far too tired to express the same thing all over again. Whenever someone shared a message about trusting in God, part of her wanted to embrace it. Another part thought, it's easy to say when you don't know what I'm going through. Her situation began to affect the way she related to others. She responded impatiently and interpreted simple questions as criticism. After speaking harshly, she would feel guilty, but the next day her exhaustion would take over again. The change didn't come through some extraordinary news. It began on an ordinary afternoon when Mariana received a call from her sister. Hearing something different in her voice, she asked her calmly if she was really okay. Mariana's automatic response was to say yes, but this time she kept silent. After a few seconds, she admitted, I'm not okay. I feel like I've been holding everything together for far too long. Saying it out loud didn't pay the bills or repair her family relationships, but it did break through a layer of isolation. Her sister didn't have all the answers. She just listened. When the call ended, Mariana realized she had spent months asking God for a solution, but she hadn't let anyone else see the depth of her exhaustion. She had confused faith with the obligation to always look strong. Over the next few days, she began to make small changes. She set aside a specific time to look over her finances, instead of stressing about them all day long. She sought guidance to reorganize some of her expenses and decided to talk to her family without yelling or placing blame, explaining that she needed their help and clearer boundaries. That first conversation wasn't perfect. One person got defensive, another avoided answering, and Mariana felt that old urge to take everything on herself again. Even so, she took a deep breath and remembered that solving things didn't mean controlling every reaction. She also brought back a simple practice. Before getting out of bed, she would place a hand over her chest and say, "God be with me in what I can do today, and help me let go of what doesn't depend on me." It wasn't a long prayer. Some days she said it with confidence. Other days she felt almost nothing. Little by little, she realized that her situation wouldn't be transformed only by a grand answer. She also needed new ways of living while looking for a way out. Weeks later, an opportunity for extra work came up. It didn't solve everything, but it offered a little relief. A member of her family began to collaborate more consistently, and another conversation helped repair part of a relationship that seemed completely broken. Mariana still had hard days, and on some nights, the worry would creep back in. The difference was she no longer automatically accepted every thought as absolute truth. When her mind told her, "You will never get out of this," she would reply, "Today I still can't see the whole way out, but I'm no longer in the same place." That shift inside changed her entire outlook. She began to notice opportunities she used to ignore because she was focused only on the worst-case scenario. She learned to ask for help without feeling ashamed and to set boundaries without thinking she was failing as a person. God's presence didn't come as a constant, overwhelming feeling. It showed up in small moments, an honest conversation, a clear thought, a night where she could sleep a little better, the strength to say no, and the willingness to try something different. As you listen to this story, maybe you see a bit of yourself in it. Your situation might be different, but you've also felt the weight of carrying too much for way too long. You don't have to explain all the details, but you can leave this phrase in the comments. God, teach me to see the change that has already begun. By writing it, you're not pretending the problem is over. You're expressing that you want to look at your journey with a more mindful hope. Mariana realized that transformation doesn't always start with an answer that changes your whole life in an instant. Sometimes it begins when you stop hiding your exhaustion, accept support, or take a simple step that seemed impossible yesterday. God can open external doors, but He can also give you the wisdom to knock on the right ones. He can bring people close to walk beside you, though you'll need to let them in. He can also give you clarity as you take a step, and not necessarily beforehand. Mariana's story doesn't end with a life without problems. It ends with a woman who no longer feels completely helpless against them. So a practical question comes up. How do you start living this way? When your mind is still racing, your heart is tired, and there's still no complete answer. There are simple steps that don't replace the power of God, but they can create a space inside where you can hear His guidance clearly again. Creating that space doesn't mean changing your entire routine overnight. When a person is exhausted, even a list of good advice can feel like another heavy burden. That's why healing usually starts best with a small practice done without pressure and with honesty. The first could be a prayer without rehearsed speeches. Many people stop praying freely because they think they have to use the right words, keep always a tone of confidence, or hiding any doubt. However, biblical prayer is full of human beings who spoke to God from their fear, frustration, sadness, and uncertainty. You can start by saying, "God, this is how I really feel." Then, name just one thing. You do not need to tell the whole story every time. Maybe today you can only say, "I'm afraid that nothing will change." Tomorrow you can express another part. Honest prayer does not inform God of something He does not know. It allows you to stop hiding in His presence. You can also stay for a few minutes in silence. It is not about forcing your mind to go completely blank because that can be frustrating. The purpose is to quiet the noise enough to recognize what is happening inside you. Sit in a quiet place whenever possible. Rest your feet on the floor and breathe naturally. As you inhale, you can think, God is here. As you exhale, I do not need to figure it all out right now. Breathing is not a spiritual formula, nor a solution to every problem. It is a simple way to help the body step out of a state of constant alertness for a moment, allowing your prayer to not be spoken solely out of haste. When a thought comes up, you do not need to fight it. Acknowledge it and return to the phrase. If your mind wanders many times, that does not mean you did something wrong. It only shows that you have been carrying too much. Another helpful practice is to write down what you are thinking. Sometimes worry seems immense because it remains formless inside your mind. By putting it on paper, you can look at it with more distance. Divide the page into two parts. In one, write what depends on me, and in the other, what does not depend on me. In the first, concrete actions might appear like making a call asking for information, organizing a document, talking to someone, or resting before making a decision. In the second, there will be the responses of other people, the timelines. You cannot control the past. You cannot change, and the outcomes you still do not know. Then, present both parts to God. Ask for wisdom to act where you have, responsibility and humility to let go of what you cannot control. This practice will not eliminate uncertainty, but it can prevent you from wasting all your energy trying to control the uncontrollable. Reading the Psalms can also keep you company. You do not need to read many chapters or understand everything in a single moment. Choose a psalm and read it slowly. Psalm 46 verse 1 says that God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in times of trouble. Notice that the text does not claim we will never face problems. It declares that within them there is a presence that sustains us. You can choose a phrase and stay with it throughout the day. When worry returns, repeat it naturally, not as a command to stop feeling, but as a reminder that fear is not the only reality right now. Worship can serve a similar purpose. A song doesn't magically change your circumstances, but it can transform the atmosphere inside you from which you face them. Choose music that helps you breathe, not the kind that artificially pumps up your emotions. Just listen to it for a few minutes without doing anything else. Let the words remind you of who God is, even when you can't understand everything that is happening. It's also important to watch the amount of noise you're taking in. When your mind is vulnerable, spending too much time consuming news comments, videos, and posts can make you feel like everything is spinning out of control. Social media shows a non-stop stream of struggles, achievements, opinions, and carefully curated lives. Without even realizing it, you can end up comparing yourself, worrying, or reacting for hours. You don't need to completely disappear. Maybe it's enough to set specific times to check your phone. Avoid looking at it first thing in the morning, or leave it far from your bed at night. Protecting your attention is also a way of protecting your hope. Rest deserves to be treated with the same seriousness. Sleep doesn't cure every kind of exhaustion, but a lack of rest makes it much harder to see any situation clearly. When you are exhausted, a small problem looks massive, and a decision can feel much more urgent than it actually is. Rest doesn't mean giving up on your responsibilities. It means recognizing that you weren't created to run without limits. Maybe you don't have the option to change your entire routine, but you can plan for a quieter night, cut out a non-essential task, ask for help, or leave for tomorrow. What doesn't need to be solved today? Setting boundaries is also a part of your spiritual life. Saying, "I can't handle that right now," isn't always selfish. It can be a responsible way to acknowledge your limits. Some people might expect you to be available all the time because you've always been there. When you start setting boundaries, some people might not understand. That doesn't mean you are doing anything wrong. A healthy boundary isn't meant to punish or control anyone else. Respectfully explain what you can give and what you can no longer carry. Talking to a safe person can also break the feeling of isolation. Not everyone deserves access to the most delicate parts of your story. Choose someone who knows how to listen, respects your trust, and won't turn your vulnerability into a topic of conversation with others. It could be a mature family member, a trusted friend, a responsible spiritual leader, or a professional who can help when the situation demands it, requires. Asking for help doesn't replace faith. On many occasions, it is one of the ways God responds through the presence and wisdom of others. Don't try to start all these practices at the same time. Choose just one. Today, maybe you will write down a worry. Tomorrow, you will turn off your phone a little earlier. Another day, you will offer a more honest prayer. Sustainable change usually grows through small decisions. That can be repeated. You don't need to prove anything to God through perfect effort. He isn't evaluating how many practices you complete or how many minutes you spend in silence. He is walking beside you as you learn to live with greater clarity and fewer demands. These tools don't guarantee that a door will open tomorrow. What they can do is help you be present, discern better, and recognize a direction when it appears. Because faith doesn't only live in the moments of prayer, it is also expressed when responding to a text, starting work, talking with family, and making decisions when nobody is watching. What does a renewed hope look like? In the middle of a life that still has responsibilities, tensions, and unresolved issues, hope begins to become visible when it changes small daily responses. It isn't always noticed in grand declarations. Sometimes it appears when you decide not to react on impulse. You pause before interpreting a word, or you stop, assuming that every silence means rejection. At work, you might find yourself under pressure while dealing with a personal worry that nobody knows about. A simple correction can touch a deeper wound and make you feel like you aren't enough. An extra task can feel like proof that nobody respects your boundaries. Everyday faith doesn't mean smiling and accepting everything. It can lead you to ask clearly what is expected of you, organize priorities, or express that you need a reasonable deadline. It can also help you distinguish between a correction that helps you improve and an opinion that doesn't define your worth. Within the family, restoration can begin when you stop repeating the same old conversation in the exact same way. Maybe you've tried to explain something many times and end up raising your voice because you feel like nobody is listening. A different response could mean choosing the right moment, speaking from your own experience, without blaming and stopping the conversation. If it starts to get hurtful, you can't control how others will react, but you can decide not to lose yourself trying to force them to understand. In some relationships, change will mean drawing closer. In others, it will mean keeping your distance. Faith doesn't always lead you to keep everything exactly the same. It can also give you the courage to recognize that a dynamic needs boundaries and a conversation requires truth, or a relationship can no longer continue under the same conditions. Unanswered messages are another place where the mind can create stories. You look at your phone, check the time, and start imagining reasons. Depending on what you've been through, the silence can trigger insecurity, anger, or fear. Before jumping to a conclusion, remember that you don't know everything happening on the other side. You can wait a reasonable amount of time, communicate clearly when necessary, and avoid using that lack of response as a measure of your worth. Your dignity doesn't increase when someone reaches out, nor does it decrease when they pull away. On social media, a mature hope learns to celebrate without using someone else's success as an accusation against your own life. When a post triggers comparison, you don't need to feel ashamed. Acknowledge the emotion and ask yourself what need it's revealing. Maybe you don't envy the trip to the house or the recognition. Maybe you long for rest, security, or the feeling that your effort is also bearing fruit. When you identify the real need, you can bring it to God and make more concrete decisions. There will be times when you need to stop looking. Not all content deserves to occupy your attention. Stepping away temporarily from something that feeds comparison can be a wise decision, not a sign of weakness. In practical worries, faith is shown by uniting prayer and responsibility. Praying for an opportunity doesn't stop you from preparing a resume, and asking for family restoration doesn't replace an honest conversation. Seeking peace doesn't eliminate the need to sort out unfinished business. A healthy spirituality doesn't disconnect you from reality. It helps you step into it without being dominated by fear. Each action may seem small, but together they build a new way to live. The person who reacted instantly yesterday today takes a breath before speaking. The one who used to hide everything begins to ask for support. The one who compared themselves for hours learns to stop. The one who needed to control every single outcome begins to focus on the next possible step. That is the kind of transformation that prepares the heart for greater changes. Don't despise the small things. A great door is usually reached through steps that nobody celebrates. A restore conversation can begin with a more careful phrase. A new opportunity can arise after a simple action done with consistency. God can use the everyday to rebuild your trust. The problem comes when you do everything possible and still don't see an answer. You've prayed, sought, guidance set, clears throat boundaries, and taken concrete steps. But everything on the outside seems to stay the same. Then the silence becomes harder. It's not just that the answer is delayed. It's that you start to wonder if God is even listening, if your prayers are going anywhere, or if you should take the delay as a sign that nothing will happen. In those moments, quick phrases don't always bring comfort. Simply saying, everything happens for a reason, can feel completely inadequate when facing pain that has no clear explanation. A mature faith does not need to invent reasons to protect God's image. It can sit with the mystery, admit it doesn't understand, and hold on without turning the delay into abandonment. But how do you keep on trusting when God doesn't answer in the way or at the time you expected? The question is deeply human. Does God's silence mean abandonment? When someone speaks and doesn't receive a clear answer, they usually interpret the silence based on their past experiences. If they were ever ignored in the past, they might feel like God is ignoring them too. If someone important walked away without an explanation, the delay can trigger the very same fear. But silence is not automatic proof of absence. There are moments when we don't see an answer simply because it hasn't arrived yet. In other moments, the answer comes in a completely different way than we imagined. There are also situations where we might never get a full explanation. Faith doesn't need to claim it knows the reason for everything. Saying God is present doesn't mean insisting that every painful event was personally designed by Him with a specific purpose. Life involves human choices, injustices, losses, and limitations that we don't always understand. God can meet us right in the middle of those realities without having approved or sent them. In Psalm 13, David asks, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me? Forever." His prayer is neither calm nor organized. It pours out a raw feeling of abandonment. Yet, that very same psalm ends by remembering God's love. That shift doesn't mean David instantly got all his answers. It shows that he was able to speak from his deepest pain and still keep the door open to trust. You can also tell God that His silence hurts you and admit that you are tired of waiting. You don't need to dress up your prayer with words that don't match how you truly feel. A real relationship also includes hard conversations. In some seasons, God may be working on the inside before anything changes on the outside. He can help you rebuild your identity, grow in discernment, recognize boundaries, or let go of an emotional dependency that you couldn't see before. This is just one possibility, not a universal explanation for every season of waiting. Not every delay means something extraordinary is being prepared. Not every closed door secretly hides a much bigger door. At times, a door simply closes, and you will just have to grieve that loss, reorganize your plans, and find a different path. Christian hope doesn't depend on turning every single loss into a perfect story. It depends on believing that no loss can ever completely separate your life from the presence of God. He can walk beside you even when the outcome isn't what you hoped for, giving you the strength to start all over again, to help you recognize a different opportunity and sustain you while you still don't know what to do. Silence can also invite us to reflect on what kind of answer we are waiting for. Maybe we ask God to change someone else, but He begins by showing us what boundary we need to set. We ask for a situation to go back to the way it was while the possibility of building something different begins to emerge. At other times, there is no immediate action to take. All that's left is to get through the day, faithfully do what is required, and resist the temptation to make desperate decisions. Waiting doesn't mean putting your whole life on hold until an answer arrives. You can keep taking care of yourself, learning and resting. You can celebrate something small without feeling like you are betraying your worry. Many people forbid themselves from feeling joy while a problem remains unresolved. They think they must stay tense to show how much they care. However, resting for a few hours doesn't mean you have forgotten. Laughing doesn't minimize your need. Living while you wait doesn't cancel out your faith. God doesn't ask you to turn worry into a form of loyalty. If this part of the message is helping you see silence in a different way, write it in the comments. Even though I don't understand everything, I am not alone. You can also use a single word to express what you need to surrender today. Control, fear, impatience, guilt, or exhaustion. Don't write it just to show a confidence you don't feel yet. Do it as an honest decision to stay open to God's presence. And even while the questions continue, silence can feel like a dark room. At first, you can't make out anything. After staying there, your eyes begin to perceive shapes that were hidden before. Maybe you still don't see a clear way out, but you are starting to recognize something. You are still here. Despite the difficult nights, you haven't lost your capacity to love, seek, try and believe. That too is a sign of life. The waiting can destroy us when it turns into passivity, isolation, and a loss of identity, but it can also help us mature when it teaches us to walk without demanding that every step be accompanied by complete certainty. How then do we transform waiting into a time that doesn't paralyze you or glorify suffering, but instead helps you keep living with dignity? Waiting with maturity doesn't mean just sitting around watching the passage of time, nor does it mean accepting any pain with the idea that suffering automatically makes you more spiritual. Suffering doesn't need to be glorified for God to be able to find you in the midst of it. There are wounds born from irresponsible human choices. There are injustices that should never have happened. Some losses are simply part of the painful limits of life. Other situations remain without any explanation that can satisfy the SAE heart. God doesn't need to call what hurt you good in order to begin restoring you. Mature waiting begins when you ask while this remains unresolved. How can I keep living in a way that doesn't destroy me? Maybe you need to reorganize a part of your life, review your priorities, cut back on spending, change a routine, or stop pouring energy into something that no longer bears fruit. Reorganizing doesn't mean giving up, it means stopping, acting as if everything has to stay the same while you wait. Discernment also grows during these seasons. You learn to observe patterns, recognizing who offers true support and who only comes around when they need something. Do you understand which decisions are born of peace and which come from desperation? Maturity doesn't eliminate mistakes, but it lessens the urge to react immediately. You can also build boundaries that weren't there before. Maybe you were waiting for someone to change so you could finally feel safe. With time, you realize that you cannot base all your stability on a decision that belongs to someone else. Setting a boundary doesn't guarantee that the other person will change. It changes the way you participate in the situation. Waiting can also become a time to reclaim your identity. When a problem takes up too much space, you begin to define yourself by that difficulty. The abandoned person, the indebted person, the sick person, the rejected person, or the one who never gets a chance. Your experience is part of your story, but it doesn't hold your entire identity. You are still someone with gifts, values, memories, possibilities, and relationships that don't depend entirely on that situation. Reclaiming your identity can start by doing something you put aside, going for walks again, cooking a meal you enjoy, listening to music, picking up a conversation again, learning something, or taking care of a space in your home. These actions are not pointless distractions. They remind your heart that life still has more than one chapter. Waiting also means letting life go on. You don't need to put off all joy until the problem ends. You can be grateful for a quiet afternoon, even if questions still remain. You can celebrate someone else's achievement without denying your own longing. God can meet you in a season you didn't choose and help you not to remain a prisoner of it. This doesn't always feel like an extraordinary experience. It can show up in the strength to get up, make that call you've been putting off, or stop constantly checking something you cannot change. Transformation starts looking less like a sudden explosion and more like a patient rebuilding. One day you notice that what used to control all your thoughts now only takes up a small part. It still matters, but it no longer defines your every hour. Then you realize that the change didn't start when the problem disappeared. It started when you regained the ability to live without giving it your entire inner self. That healing also touches wounds, deepest parts, because behind so many of your worries, today there are past experiences of abandonment, betrayal, or rejection that taught your heart to always expect the worst. To prevent a new situation from being viewed solely through the lens of old pain, it will be necessary to let God draw close to those places where it's still hard to trust. Some wounds stay active long after the actual event ended. Not because you've chosen to live in the past, but because those painful experiences change the way you view safety, love, and your own self-worth. Abandonment can teach you to expect goodbyes, even when someone approaches you with genuine sincerity. Part of you watches every little detail, looking for signs that they will also leave. Betrayal can make you second-guess kind words. You hear a promise, but you instantly remember another one that was broken. You desperately want to trust even though your heart keeps its distance. Constant exhaustion can lead you to believe that letting your guard down is dangerous. Because if you stop controlling everything, something will go terribly wrong. You stay busy, not just out of responsibility, but because stopping allows all those emotions you've been avoiding to catch up with you. The feeling of never being enough can hide behind a constant struggle to please everyone. You say yes when you desperately want to say no. You wear yourself out solving problems that aren't even yours, fearing that if you stop being useful, you will also stop being loved. God doesn't look at these reactions with contempt. He understands exactly where they came from, but he doesn't want them to keep ruling over your life forever. Emotional healing doesn't mean erasing your memory. It means being able to remember without getting completely trapped in that same painful experience. It means you can look back at what happened and say, well, that really hurt me, but I don't need to build my entire life around the fear of it happening all over again. Sometimes healing will require distance. Forgiving someone doesn't mean you have to rebuild an unsafe relationship, nor does it mean letting them hurt you the same way again. Reconciliation requires truth, accountability, and genuine change from both sides. You can let go of the urge for revenge while still keeping a healthy boundary in place. You can pray for someone without letting them back into your inner circle. Having dignity also means refusing to negotiate your worth with people who only accept you when you meet their expectations. Your value isn't decided by human approval. Long before anyone ever chose or rejected you, you were already deeply known by God. Psalm 147 verse 3 says that he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. That image is one of patience. A bandaged wound needs gentle care, time, and protection. It shouldn't be constantly exposed just to prove that it doesn't hurt anymore. Maybe you need to treat yourself with that very same patience. Don't force your heart to trust immediately after a painful betrayal. Don't beat yourself up for feeling afraid. And don't look at a hard day as if you've lost all your progress. Healing doesn't always move in a straight line. There will be days when you will feel strong. And on other days, a memory will stir something up, unexpected. That doesn't mean you went back to the beginning. Now you are more aware. You can recognize what's happening. Ask for space, seek support, and choose a different response. God can walk with you through that rebuilding without rushing you. His presence isn't pressure to get better quickly. It is a place where you can rest while you learn how to feel safe again. Maybe for years you tried to prove that nothing could hurt you. Now you can let yourself say, yes, it hurt, but I don't want to keep living my life controlled by that wound. That phrase holds truth and hope. It doesn't deny what happened, nor does it hand the future over to the past. The situation you're waiting to see change might involve other people and circumstances you can't control. Yet, there is a part of that restoration that can start within you, reclaiming your voice, your power to choose, and the deep belief that you deserve to be treated with respect. When that dignity awakens, it changes the way you walk, respond, and choose. You no longer need to keep chasing after what makes you feel small, nor settle for emotional crumbs just to avoid being lonely. Nor are you obligated to explain your boundaries over and over to someone who chose not to respect them. God can teach you to love without losing yourself and to forgive without denying the truth, rebuilding your trust without becoming naive. Victory isn't always about getting back exactly what you lost. At times, it's about not losing yourself anymore, trying to win it back. With that understanding, declarations of faith stop being just empty words. They become choices that honor the process and declare that fear will no longer hold absolute authority over your future. Today, you can acknowledge that you have walked through hard days without denying how heavy they were. You don't have to downplay what demanded so much from you, but you don't have to keep treating it like a life sentence. Fear is allowed to speak, but it will no longer be the only voice you hear. When it tells you everything will end badly, you can answer that there are still possibilities you don't know about yet. When it uses the past to predict the future, you'll remember that a past experience has no authority to define every new opportunity. Your story didn't stop at your last disappointment. It is still being written through choices, connections, boundaries, lessons, and paths you haven't walked yet. You can admit that you don't control everything without feeling completely helpless. There are steps that do depend on you. Asking questions, seeking support, preparing yourself, speaking with honesty, and resting before making a decision. What is out of your hands can be given to God once again. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you choose not to carry it anymore, as if your worry could ever bring about the answer. Starting today, you don't need to see every delay as a rejection. Some answers just take time, while others arrive in a completely different way. Certain doors won't open, but that doesn't mean all paths have been shut. God can still surprise you. He can give you an idea you hadn't even considered, bring someone into your life to guide you or help you recognize a hidden opportunity right inside the everyday moments. He can also give you the strength you need to accept an ending and begin a new chapter. Victory doesn't mean you'll never feel afraid again. It means that fear won't make all of your decisions anymore. You can feel uncertain and still keep moving forward. You will look back on the past without losing your identity again. And you'll recognize an emotion without automatically acting on every single impulse. Today, you choose to treat yourself with greater compassion. Harshness didn't make you move any faster. Criticizing yourself for being tired didn't bring you new strength. Demanding perfect faith from yourself only made the burden heavier. You can come to God just as you are. He doesn't need a rehearsed version of you. He knows your doubts, your limits, and that tiny spark of hope that still remains burning. That light is enough to take the next step. Your life doesn't need to change completely in a single morning for something real to be happening. Responding differently is already a change. An honest conversation is already a change. A night with a little more rest is a change, too. Don't look down on small beginnings. A seed doesn't look like a tree yet, but it holds a direction. The clarity that seems so small today can turn into an important decision. The boundary that's hard for you to set right now can protect your peace for years. The help you accept can open up a season you couldn't have reached alone. God has not finished His work in you. This doesn't mean that everything will turn out exactly as you wish. It means your growth, your restoration, and your ability to truly live again don't depend entirely on a single outcome. You can keep going even if an answer changes. You can rebuild even if a relationship doesn't return. Find purpose after a loss and learn to trust with wisdom again. Pain won't have the privilege of writing the end. Your current situation can change. Some parts might change soon. Others will need time. It could also happen that the greatest transformation will be how you walk within your reality. That change is no small thing. A person with peace can recognize a door that panic wouldn't let them see. Those who reclaim their dignity stop chasing what destroys them, and those who accept support discover strengths they thought they had lost. Today, you recognize that God continues to be present. You don't have all the answers, but you aren't completely alone either. You don't know how everything will turn out, but you no longer need to face the future with the darkest outcome in mind. Something deep inside you has begun to rise up. Hope didn't return as a loud, overwhelming emotion. It came as a quiet conviction. There is still life after this moment. Right now, you don't need to keep pushing so hard. After looking at your fear, the waiting, and the wounds with honesty, it is time to quiet the noise. Before you pray, let your body receive the message your soul has already heard. You don't have to stay on high alert all the time. Find a slightly more comfortable position as you keep listening. You don't have to do anything complicated. Just let your shoulders drop and let go of what you have been holding on to without realizing. Breathe slowly. Don't try to overfill your lungs. Let the air enter naturally and leave without a rush. You've spent so much time thinking, worrying, solving, and trying to keep everything in order. During these next few minutes, you don't need to find any more answers. You can just rest here because God is present in this simple moment. You don't have to prove your strength or hide how tired you are. The thing that worries you the most can wait for a moment while your inner self rests. Maybe you feel tension in your chest, in your face, or in your hands. Don't fight it. Recognize that your body has also carried this burden. It has stayed on guard, lost sleep, and carried worries you couldn't always put into words. Tell it in silence. I don't have to figure everything out right now. Breathe again. With every exhale, imagine letting go of a tiny part of that control. Not everything all at once, just what you can release right now. It might be a conversation you keep replaying in your mind, the desperate need to know what tomorrow holds someone's face. An unpaid bill, a hard decision, or some news you're waiting for. You aren't saying it doesn't matter anymore. You are simply acknowledging that your strength has its limits. God can hold the things you cannot carry all the time. Let the words of this message sink back into your heart. Everything can change. Not as a demand to feel happy right away, nor as a rushed promise. Just receive it as a sign that your present is not an endless prison. Feelings change, seasons pass, clarity can return, and your strength can be rebuilt. There are doors you haven't seen yet, and decisions that haven't been made. Even if things don't change exactly the way you hoped, you are not destined to stay trapped in this emotional state forever. God can teach you how to live with greater freedom. Remember, for just a moment, how much you've already been through, not to bring back the pain, but to realize that you made it this far. There were days when you thought you couldn't go on, and yet you took another step. You didn't do it all perfectly, but it wasn't really necessary either. God's grace was also present in your faltering steps. Now, let your heart stop defending itself for a few moments. You don't need to anticipate another disappointment while you pray. You can come before God without knowing how He will answer. Prayer isn't an attempt to convince Him, but a place of surrender. Maybe you don't have your own words. You can rest in the ones you hear and make them your own when they express what you feel. Think of just one worry you want to place before God, not 10, just one. Recognize His name within you. Observe how it makes you feel, but don't let that emotion become your entire identity. You are more than this problem, more than this waiting, and more than the decisions someone else made. You are a life known, seen, and loved by God. Your breathing becomes a little calmer, and the inner noise quietens down. Nothing has to be forced. Peace doesn't always come as an intense emotion. Sometimes it's simply the possibility of being still for a minute without fighting the future. Stay in that place. After everything you've heard, you don't need another conclusion. You need presence. Let's draw near to God with honesty, placing before Him the situation you long to see transformed, and also the part of your heart that needs to learn to wait without losing itself. Loving Father, today, I come to you just as I am. I don't want to hide my weariness or use words that don't express what I'm feeling. You know, the situation that has been weighing on my mind, the answer I'm waiting for, and the fear that creeps in when I imagine that nothing will change. You've seen every attempt and, the conversations, the decisions, the sleepless nights of worry, and the moments when I tried to stay strong in front of others. Today, I lay it all down before you. Not because I've stopped caring, but because I no longer want to carry alone what is beyond my strength. Take this worry and the fear I've built up through scenarios that haven't even happened yet. Help me distinguish what is really happening from everything my heart is afraid of reliving. When the past tries to define every new moment, give me clarity. When guilt tries to keep me prisoner, show me what I need to acknowledge, repair, and finally let go. When comparison makes me feel like I'm running late, remind me that my life doesn't need to follow someone else's timeline. Father, renew my hope in a genuine way. I don't want a fleeting feeling that fades the moment this message ends. I need a hope that is able to stay with me tomorrow when I return to my responsibilities and face things that still aren't resolved. Give me the serenity to act where I have responsibility. Show me the phone call I need to make, the conversation I need to have, the boundary I must set, and the small step I can take. Grant me also the humility to recognize what doesn't depend on me. Don't let me confuse worry with love or control with security. Teach me how to rest without feeling guilty, and to remember that pausing for a moment doesn't mean giving up the fight. Entrust my family to you. The tensions we don't know how to express, the unspoken words and the fears that each one of us carries in silence. Bring wisdom to our conversations. Wherever possible, open paths of reconciliation. Where boundaries are needed, give us strength without cruelty. Protect our hearts so we don't keep reopening wounds we've never wanted to acknowledge. Look also upon the person listening to this prayer right now as they go through financial worries, job uncertainty, or a difficult decision. Open, honest opportunities give them clarity to manage, patience to build, and the courage to ask for guidance. Don't let despair lead us to decisions that only bring more pain. Walk beside those waiting for answers about their health, their home, or a loved one. We don't claim to understand everything that happens, but we ask to feel your presence in the midst of it all. Hold our weary minds and bring calm when our thoughts start to race. Let us find rest tonight and let tomorrow bring the strength we need to face only what belongs to that day. Father, step into the wounds of abandonment, betrayal, and rejection. Gently touch the things that still bring us fear. Help us to forgive without denying the truth, to protect our dignity, and to stop running back to places where our hearts are treated without respect. Remind us that our worth is not decided by whether someone accepts us or not. We are known by you. We are seen by you, and our story remains open in your hands. If the door we are waiting for is meant to open, give us patience and prepare us to walk through it with wisdom. If there is another path, help us recognize it without feeling like our life is over. If we need to let something go, give us the courage to say goodbye. If something needs to be rebuilt, teach us to do it without rushing and on a firmer foundation. We don't want to demand that everything goes according to our plans. We want to stay open to your guidance. Yet you know the deep desire we bring before you today. Look at this situation and step in the way only you can. Shift what needs to be shifted open. Conversations bring clarity and awaken responsibility in the hearts that need to change. Connect opportunities, people, and decisions that can lead us into a new season. While we wait, don't let the waiting steal our identity. Give us back the joy of living. Help us enjoy the simple moments. Receive the love that is already here. And notice the small signs of healing. Don't let this struggle take over our entire inner world. Give us a peace that can live with questions that are still unanswered. Today, I choose to believe that my current situation doesn't have the authority to write all on its own. The ending of my story. There are still possibilities. I can still learn and start over again. Your presence is still with me. When fear creeps back in, remind me of this truth. When I look around and it feels like nothing is moving, help me notice what has already started to change deep inside of me. When an answer comes, give me the humility to receive it. When a door opens up, grant me the discernment to know if I should walk through. When I need to wait just a little longer, hold my heart so it doesn't close itself off again. Father, thank you because you never treat me like a burden. Thank you because you know my words even before I can speak them. Thank you because I can come to you with my doubts and still find a safe place in your presence. I find my rest in you. I let go of what I cannot control, and I receive the strength to take the next step. I hold close inside of me this conviction as I walk with you. No difficult season will ever have the power to destroy all my hope. In the name of Jesus, amen. Just stay for a few quiet seconds. You don't need to rush out of this moment. Take a breath and let this prayer settle deep within you. Share this message with someone who is going through a situation that seems completely stuck. Maybe that person doesn't need an explanation, but just a word to remind them that there is still hope. Subscribe to the official Messages of God channel and come back to keep receiving messages that walk alongside your faith and strengthen your heart. By staying tuned and sharing directly from our official channel, you also help us protect and support this work. We will meet again in the next message. Until then, remember, what seems completely still today will never be stronger than the life that God can still raise up inside of you.